Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Front Door Show. This is Four Fantastic Events. I am DJ Puerta, your host, and today we have a special guest and a guy I've been wanting to interview since I started this for quite a while, Mr. Wayne Williams. How you doing, Wayne?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. And then hello to everybody else. Do me a favor. I'm setting everything up on my Four Fantastic page, the page. And creating the watch party. Can you introduce yourself in case there's somebody who might not know you? Very few, but
My name is Wayne Williams. Um, I do the Chosen Few picnic event. I've been a DJ since 1974, known for being one of the first house music pioneers, as well as working at the very first house music label, Trax Records. I went on from Trax Records to work at Jive Records, signing a whole lot of different R&B and pop artists and dance music artists as well. And I think that's a very brief edited version of me.
all right. So let's start from the beginning. You said about you started. What got you into wanting to DJ in the first place for you? What was your inspiration for that?
Well, my sister boyfriend, he was a DJ, and I was in seventh grade.
Right.
And my sister's like 3 years older than me. So my mother, whenever she let my sister go to his house to these basement parties, she made me go kind of like as a chaperone.
Right.
And so he would be DJing, and then they would be slow dancing, and the record would go off. And this is back in the days when there was only one turntable. And so I was back there, and so I would put on the next record, and they kept dancing, and and I saw that they kept dancing, and that's what gave me the
How old are
bug.
you? How old are you at this time?
I'm 13,
Okay? 13.
13,
Okay.
yeah. And so back then we were playing stuff like Confunction and Barcades and Parliament Funkadelic and Cameo, stuff like that.
The funk music, basically, right?
Exactly, R&B and funk. Yeah, Earth, Wind
Okay.
and Fire, Emotions, Commodores. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so that was okay. So you were basically saying, okay, I have a turntable,
hmm
but when did you say, okay, I want to be a DJ, or because then now two tables are involved. So when does that happen?
Well,
When does
that was his turntable, right? That was
okay,
Ewart. His name was Ewart Abner, and that was his turntable. And his dad worked for a record label, and so he had like brand new technique that no one had, So it was really cool. The fact that I got a chance that was like my first experience, and uh, and so Ewart, kept giving parties and DJing other places, and I had a record collection even at that point because I would buy records all the time, and so I would go with him, and that's what really gave me the bug to DJ. Now, it took a couple years before I got my second turntable, and I would say that was probably 1975.
okay,
For literally 2 years, I used to DJ with one turntable, and or no, or there would be two turntables, but one turntable at a time. There was no mixer,
right, right, right,
I didn't have a mixer then,
right.
and so by the time I graduated and was a freshman in high school, I went to Mendel Catholic High School.
Okay.
And so my upperclassmate gave a party at this club called the Den One, which was on the north side. I had never been to the north side before at that point. And it was at a gay club. I had never been to a gay club at that point, right? And so, but you don't care. I didn't know it was a gay club at the time. So I'm thinking, because he rented the space out. So I'm thinking we're just going to a party, with my peers. And so I get there, and he was pretty eccentric. His name was Craig Thompson, who later opened up this club called The Playground. And he gave this party there, and he was standing outside the club in a tuxedo, right? And a limousine. And I'm like, wow, look at this guy, And for me, as a freshman coming into high school, I just thought, wow, this is really exciting. And you have to understand, this is during the disco years.
Correct,
Disco
correct.
was, 70, 74 was
Studio
I was
54.
14, 75, I was 15, 76, I was 16, 77, I was 17. So disco was huge then, you know.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
so this was 1974. And so I went up to the DJ because I'm not only am I hearing him play this music, but it doesn't stop. And I'm like, hold on, how does he keep changing? How does he change the record without the music stopping? Right. And I couldn't even understand that. So I said, I got to go up because the DJ booth was upstairs. I got to go up and see what he's doing. And so he showed me that he had two turntables and a mixer. And I saw the mixer. I'm like, oh, so how do you keep the records going? He says, well, this allows me to keep the record going, the mixer,
So who was the
by
DJ? Who
playing
was the
two records
DJ?
at the same time.
Who was the
And
DJ at the time?
so I said, okay, cool. And I said, well, where can I find this music? He says, well, you have to find it like in a gay club. I said, a gay club? I was like, what's a gay club? Right. And he says, you're standing in one. I said, I'm standing in one. He said, yeah. And I still didn't understand. I'm like, well, okay, well, what makes it gay? You know? And the DJ booth was upstairs. And so he said, look downstairs at the bar. And I looked down at the bar. He said, you see those two guys huddled up? And I looked and I'm like, oh, wow, they was like kissing each other. I was like, whoa, wow. I was like, oh, wow, okay. He said, that's what makes it gay. I'm like, but I honestly didn't care about that. I was like, okay, cool. But how do I find this music? Because once I heard it, I'm like, I knew this is the music I want to play going forward. And he asked me where I lived. And at that time, I was living in South Shore. And he said, there's a gay bar on 71st and Jeffrey called the Jeffrey Pub. He said they played this kind of music because I'd heard disco before, Prieto, but it was really commercial disco. It wasn't this kind of soulful disco that this guy was playing, right? This DJ was playing. And so I'm like, where do I find this kind of music like Freeman, South Shore Commission, and Candido, you know, Thousand Finger Man, and My Love Is Free, and Silver Convention, and stuff like that. I said, where do I find this kind of music? And he said, well, go to the Jeffrey Pub. It's on 71st. I lived on 72nd, and right off Jeffrey, on Jeffrey. I was like, okay, cool. And that's what I did. And that's kind of how I found the music, you know.
Who was the DJ that was
I can't
DJing
hear you,
at the-
Pieta.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Okay, hold on.
That's me.
Okay.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah,
I
okay.
said, who was the DJ that was DJing over in the club in the north side? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Ron Hardy.
Okay, all right.
It was Ron Hardy. Yeah, because I asked him his name. He said Ron Hardy. And that's how I met Ron Hardy. That's the first time I met Ron Hardy. It was at the Den One. He had a residency there.
Okay. All right. So that's kind of important.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you go back to the gay club now over on by your neighborhood, but you're only 15 years old at this time, right?
Right.
How do you get into the club, or how's it?
Well, I'm tall for my age, and I'm a guy.
Okay.
So, you know, back then it's the 70s, man. They weren't nowhere near as strict as they were then, you know.
Okay.
And so you know, I just walked right in, honestly, and I went to the DJ and I asked him. I said, "Hey, could you teach me how to DJ?" You know, and mix this music, and I want to learn this music. And the Jeffrey Pub had a very small DJ booth, and he said, "All right, come on up here." You know, he scooted. He said, "Come on, you can sit on my lap." And he was kind of touching my arms a little too much. I was like, oh, hold on. Oh, you know, I think I got to go to the bathroom. Right. And so that was too much for me. So I left out of there. And before I left out of there, I asked the guy, I said, is there another DJ on Saturday? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, cool. So I came back on Saturday the next day, and I went up to that DJ and I asked him pretty much the same thing. And he was really cool. He was really laid back. Cool. Sure, I can teach you. I'll show you. His name was Michael Ezebuku. Really great guy. And I would go up there every Saturday to the Jeffrey Pub and learn this music. And then he told me other gay clubs where I could go hear this music, like the records I like. He said, just go ask the DJ. There was no show Shazam back then, right?
Right.
So he said, just go ask the DJ, and ask the DJ. And I went to a lot of different clubs then, but I knew at that point that's the music I wanted to play going forward, just disco music, and which was, going forward when I started doing that, I cleared a lot of dance floors, right? Because my peers weren't used to that,
They were used to the funk and
they were
the
used to
R&B.
R&B and funk, absolutely,
Right.
in our community. And not only that, back then, it was known, disco music was known as gay music. So I started getting called a bunch of names for playing the music and stuff, and people would come to my party like, you're going to that gay party that, even worse names than that, and you're going, and you have to understand back then, these parties were all like in basements because we were teenagers. We couldn't go to clubs. So they were in like people's basements in Jackson Highlands and Hyde Park and South Shore, all over the South Side.
Right.
And people would, once people started getting hip to what I was playing and started to feel it, they would always do these parties in the basement of people's houses. And so you go up to, people would come up and they're like, man, they talking about the kind of music you playing outside. I'm like, well, what are they saying? Man, you don't want to go to that party and play that gay music, that house music, because for them, disco was foreign, coming out of the black people's houses, neighborhoods,
So I just want to make sure it wasn't called house music yet.
No, they were calling it, in fact, it was a derogatory term back then,
Okay.
They were calling it house music because you have to understand, disco was heard, it was, at that time, it was only known in gay clubs, in gay discos. They weren't playing it at regular straight parties, especially with black folks. So when they started playing this, when I started playing this music, and like I said, we were playing it, I was doing most of the parties at people's houses and basements. The so-called thugs would be like, man, you going to that? Because they want to hear stepping music. Man, you gonna play some stepping music? No, bro, I play nothing but disco. Oh man, you play that gay music, that house music. Because that's where they heard it. That's the first place they heard it, was out of these houses that were coming out these neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago. So that's the first time I heard the term house music.
Okay, and then when did you become, or I guess the epiphany of here, it went from just being the basement to you being actual DJ, because you're a basement DJ at this point.
Right, basement DJ. But you have to understand, I'm in high school, right? And so not only was I a basement DJ, but once I started getting popular from 75 to 77, I was the only one playing. I was the only one that really had this music, right? So I had to get hired to do most of the parties if they want to hear disco the whole party, right? And so not only was I doing basement parties, then I was doing like high school parties. Like I would do Elizabeth Seton, Longwood, Whitney Young, Kenwood, So I would do all their parties. We'd do parties at McClenda's, the Blue Gargoyle.
And it was just you. It was just you. It wasn't. It was you didn't have.
At that time, it was just me.
Okay.
And I had my road dog was Batman, aka his name is Robert Ellis, but aka Batman. So me and him, we would do all these parties and promote all these parties at different places, lofts, racquetball clubs, racquetball courts. We do pool parties, Marina Tower. I mean, we do parties all over. And then even promoters started to hire us. Like the first couple promoters was like Tony Smith and Arthur Bailey and Lonzo Brazil, because they actually brought fashion with the parties we were doing. So it really became a thing, this sort of style party that I was doing. Like I said, it was very different from what every other back then straight DJ in the black community was playing at the time. And so they brought fashion to it. There was a certain style that Arthur Bailey and Tony Smith and Lonzo and Cedric Ball, these were all guys who they would dress really GQ and sharp, and they would come to the parties, and And then they would start promoting parties as well because they became popular as well. Because the music started blowing up. Everybody wanted to hear this music. And it was known to have a lot of pretty girls from the neighborhood, upscale pretty girls, come to these parties. And so, of course, where pretty girls are, guys want to come. And so it really started to become a scene, you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I want to, before we go further on this, is
Mm-hmm.
that in your household, I think you had mentioned personally to me that your father listened to a lot of music as well, right? Was into music as well, and that
Yeah.
was more the step music. Is that what it was mostly into? He was
No, my dad was into jazz.
Okay, jazz.
You know,
So,
hardcore jazz too. I
all
mean,
right.
like Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff, Oscar Peterson, stuff like that.
Okay, so none of that, but just because of growing up, you didn't play any of that music, or you didn't collect any of that music. Starting in as far as your
Not jazz.
okay.
Although my dad would remind me, like I used to play a version this record called "Sing Sing Sing" at my parties
Mhm.
by the Charlie Kalela Orchestra, and he reminded me when he heard, because I would bring cassette tapes home or whatever, and he would say, "That's Benny Goodman." I said, "Benny Goodman? Who's Benny Goodman?" He's like, "Benny Goodman made that," and then he would play the album for me. I'm like, "Whoa, right?" Because I had no idea, right? And I'm like, "That's the version I heard, the Charlie Kalela Orchestra." So things like that would happen. You know?
Right, and then us realizing as we get into the production, and we realize that a lot of music was borrowed from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, were you basically doing mobiles? Is that what you were kind of doing? Is that as far
Absolutely.
as okay,
Mobile. Because at the time when I was in high school, the big DJ at the time was Kirk Townsend. And he
okay,
would play all genre music. He would play funk. He would play R&B. He would play some steppers, and he would play disco too. You know, so he played all genres. You know, and he was like the huge DJ for my peers at that time. You know, and so yeah, and he went to Mendel too. He went to Mendel Catholic High School too, and that's kind of how those Mendel parties blew up, and the fact that and then dance groups started happening as well. They had this big dance group at Mendel called the Doctors, which spurred so many other dance groups, Ebony Gents, Man in High Rank, Ladies with Class. I mean, so many different, the Corderies, you know, RSS Force, so many different dance groups or groups would come from that scene as well. And so it just became huge party scene for our peers at that time. And when I tell you huge, I'm talking period of like 2,000-3,000 kids come to these parties.
right. Well, and one of the things that I've always recognized is that, believe it or not, dance group in any genre of music is a part of what makes a dance scene what it is, because for whatever you're playing, they would come up with routines, and that's
Absolutely.
and they would have their competitions and so forth and so on. So hence
Yeah.
what was happening on your end of Chicago was happening on the west side, was happening on the north side with their little dance groups and stuff like that. And it
Right.
kind of did the same thing. Every little high school had their little dance groups as well. And it
Sure.
used to be high school against high school kind of dance groups.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that was very, very common in that era, because I think that's what also was a factor that was happening during high school for a lot of kids, because it was a bit of a freedom, if you want to say that their expression of a freedom for them, because they can create something out of their this music that they're
Yeah.
listening to. And obviously there would be dance groups that do funk and R&B, but when you got something a little faster like house music, then it's more exciting. It's more like
Yeah.
or even more challenging, if you want to say. So I can see that dance group happening, because it happened all over the
Sure.
place. So after you, let's say, graduate high school, what happens to you? Where do you go from this point as far as the DJ aspect?
Well, before I graduated, because I graduated in '78, but in '77 is when the demand got so crazy. That's when I said I needed to get some help and get other DJs. That's when I got my brother involved, Jesse Saunders, and And so I literally had to drag him to a party because back then he was like really into rock music. You know, he was like in the groups like Boston and Peter Frampton and stuff like that. And but I was able to kind of trick him into going to the party with me. And because he used to fool around making these pause button cassette edits, right? And so I said, look, at the time, Flashlight was a real big record for me.
Right.
And I'm like, look, I want you to make a pause button edit of this Flashlight. And he did. I said, okay, now you got to come to the party. And there was this big party I was doing at the Burning Spear. It had to be over 2,000 kids there. And I said, we're going to play this edit right at the right moment.
So,
let
so
you
it's
know.
not just turntables you're playing, you're also playing cassettes. as
Cassette,
well.
absolutely.
Yeah, right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah, because now it's further into, then I got, you're right, 2 turntables, cassettes, and at one point I had a reel-to-reel too,
Right, right.
And so we played it. I'm like, okay, we're gonna hit it right now. Boom, we hit it, and the place went crazy, right? I mean, it was already a hot record, but the fact they never heard this version, they went nuts, right? And Jesse saw it, and when I saw his eyes light up, I said, okay, I got him now, right? And so I got him in my group and then I started the Chosen Few.
Is that was when you first came out with that term, Chosen Few? As far
Chosen
as...
Few. Before then, in '75, when I got to Mendo, I started the group. It's called the Few Disco Corporation.
Okay.
But in '77, when I decided to make it just DJs, because when it was the Few, I had Ewart, the guy who I told you about, my sister's boyfriend.
Right, right.
I had Batman, who also went to Mendo, but he had built speakers, so I used his speakers. And then I had Jamie Shelton, who also went to Mendo with me, who designed the flyers. But then in '77, I just wanted to make it an all DJ group. And so that's when I rebranded the name to Chosen Few. And then I started the Chosen Few DJs.
All right. And then that was where there was Jesse Saunders and you, basically the first two.
Yeah.
Where does it continue on that point?
Then Tony Hatchett, we did a party at St. Albie's, and Tony Hatchett was at that party. He came up to us and like, man, I want to DJ with you guys. So I'm like, okay, we'll check him out. And so that's how we got Tony. And then Alan came later. He came in 1980, and they all used to play out of my crates at that time because I was the only one brave enough to go into the gay clubs, right, and find the music. And so back then they were pretty homophobic when it came to that. And so, but they would, each one of them started to become popular on their own at the parties, and they would want to do their own parties, but they would take my records, but they would always lose them or someone would steal them out the way. So I would get upset about it. I'm like, man, come on, man. And so I knew I had to find a DJ who also had records as well. And so we went to this party at University of Chicago Lab, and Jesse was like, man, it's just gonna be a nice party. A bunch of cute girls go to Lab. So I'm like, cool, let's check it out. And we get there. And while he's checking out the girls, I'm listening to the DJ. I'm like, hold it. He's playing disco. And back then, there wasn't a lot of DJs playing disco, but especially the style we did. But he was playing the style we did, and he had his own records. So I was like, we got to get him in the group. And that was Alan King.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And that's how I got Alan into the group. And then
Andre. Alan was going to U of I, right? Alan was going to
University of Chicago. Yeah.
Studying to be a lawyer.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. Right. And so then after that, we got Andre in the group, and who's Tony's brother. So that was easy, and that's kind of how we all came together.
All right. So here you start Chosen Few.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're as a group, what does that mean for you guys as far as what you're coming into nightclubs, or you guys are just spreading or doing more mobiles and kind of
doing more mobiles, we did all, but now, not mind you, now it's 78, 79, 80. We were so big, we pretty much did all the high schools. We started to do the colleges like IIT, Chicago State.
Okay.
And then we would also start to do, like I said, we rent out venues like Sawyer's or the Penthouse or First Impressions, places all over Chicago where we rent out spaces and places, and Fulton Market, and we would do parties all over. So we were just doing parties all over,
Okay.
especially
So,
the whole downtown hotel scene started to take off too, and we would do parties in a lot of downtown hotels as well.
but am I correct on this? At that same time, there was also a wave of this of gay clubs starting to happen at the same time as well. That was starting to come downtown as well. Remember?
Well, in '70, well, the Warehouse started. It was all male gay club in '77.
Right, right,
I mean, it was actually before '77, but Frankie didn't come to Chicago to 1977, right?
right, right,
And it
right.
took him about a year to get his niche. So it wasn't that many people really going there, 77, 78. But after around 78, the warehouse started to go. And but then it was pretty much an all male gay club, right?
Right.
And I would say 79, 80, that's when the straight kids started to filter down to the Warehouse along with the gay kids. You know,
That was me. That was me.
right. And I think, and then they had already known they already knew what disco was. They had because the stuff I did on the South Side and other DJs started playing disco as well, all over Chicago.
Right.
But they hadn't had that club experience, right? And that's what Frankie gave them. He gave them that super sound system club sort of experience that they hadn't had, because we were doing parties mobile. Most of our parties were mobile, so we didn't have a sound system like a Richard Long, like the Richard Long sound system Frankie had, right? Which was amazing. And then the lights they had in there, I mean, it was really great. And Robert Williams, who owned the Warehouse, he really knew how to decorate and theme each particular night out too. So it was always an experience when you went there,
Right. And then how did you guys, did you go there? Did you like?
Oh yeah, I went there. The first time I went there, Frankie hadn't got to Chicago yet. And Robert was DJing, the owner of the Warehouse. He was actually the DJ. And I never forget it too, because I was like, man, this guy is horrible. He can't DJ. I was like, this club is never gonna make it, right? And I never forget that, because Craig Cannon, DJ, took me down there, right? And so I would say maybe 6 months, 7 months later, I went back there, and that's when Frankie came, and I'm like, okay, now they got a DJ, now they got a good DJ, right? But we'll see, he was getting his feet wet, learning, because you have to understand the New York disco and Chicago disco, it was similar, but there were still some things that were different, And once Frankie, once he took his time and went around and hear what the DJs in Chicago were playing, it took him a while. Then he realized what works in Chicago versus what works in, like, give you an example, like Lace Can't Play Around. That was a huge record in New York. That record did nothing here in Chicago. It was a stiff. So he was playing that record like,
I'll give you.
Stuff,
I'll give you, for instance, Martin Circus took 15 years before it became a big hit.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it was one of those from New York that was.
Yeah.
And I remember it. I said, "What do you mean this is 15 years old?"
Right. Well, Martin Circus, like for us on the South Side, Martin Circus was huge. It was a big record early.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that by the time it hit kind of, in the 80s or
the 80s,
the 70s, it was, I don't know if you know that, but it was almost like 15 years old or 12 years old. Yeah.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
It was, and that was kind of, for me, like, where the hell this record been?
Right.
But it was so obscure for that. It was before its time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's what happened with New York, because the music was before its time for us Chicagoans to understand it and to appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, we started playing Martin Circus in 76.
Right.
I want to say, and it was a huge record for us though right away. I mean, that was a known chosen few staple record was Martin Circus,
Right.
And at that time I hadn't been to New York yet, so I didn't know what they was playing in New York, But I think but you're right. There's so many records that are regional that you don't realize, unless you start traveling,
Right. Okay. So at this time, warehouse is big enough, but it's having its own clientele. You
Mhm.
guys are doing your clientele because you have your mobile, you're doing the shows on you,
Mhm.
but you guys don't merge yet, right? You guys have there's no synergy yet until later on. I mean, am I correct? As far as
Synergy with what?
what the crowds, I mean, with having the same crowds and stuff like that. As far as what would classify the culture of house music at that time. Because what Frankie was doing and what you were doing, you guys were attacking different crowds at the time. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, Frankie was, like I said, he started off. It was a straight gay club, right?
Right,
All men's
right,
gay club, and
and
our club was primarily straight, straight
right,
peers,
right,
teenagers, and stuff like that.
right,
Um, so yeah, now we both played disco. We both had disco crowds, but one did not know of the other. Like Frankie had no idea what we were doing on the South Side,
right, right,
and most of those kids had no idea what Frankie was doing at the warehouse.
right.
Not till later. That didn't come till later.
Right. Well, and that I think that's important that people know that because,
Mhm.
and I think the records help that
Yeah,
that connection.
absolutely.
Jesse Saunders and
Yeah.
and all the stuff that came afterwards. So and that's where I guess that's where my next question is, what happens with you as in the 80s, 84, just before the records, what happens between that?
But
As
let me
far
say this: a lot of people think that Frankie played house music, right? And that has to be explained. What I mean by that is Frankie never played house music, the genre, right? Because it wasn't made to 84. The warehouse closed in 82. So how
right,
could it? It would be
right,
impossible, right? He
right,
played disco, just like every other DJ back then was playing disco music.
right.
Um, the genre wasn't created to 84 as far as the drum machines. But the reason why I say it has to be explained is because the kids on the South Side were calling disco music because that's what they heard coming out to people's houses. They were calling it house music. So they were literally calling house music disco. Like, so when you hear these disco records, because they knew R&B, they knew funk, but this disco was foreign to them. So all they knew was these kids are playing in their house in these basement parties and these different venues.
So
That's what they're hearing, disco house music. So they would.
so
So in other words, "Let No Man Put Us Under" to them was a house record.
okay. So
Uh, uh,
let me interject that. Maybe let me. So do you think the term house music instead of disco was like if they say disco, oh that's gay. House, it's easier to should I say it wasn't homophobic in that sense.
yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it like that, but that's a good point, Fredo. Yeah, probably so.
Like
Uh,
the same song is disco, but they call it house because they want to.
exactly, to
They want
assimilate with the disco and the gay thing.
to.
That's a
Right.
great point. Absolutely, I never thought of that, but I think you hit something right on the head there.
Right, because
And because I'm thinking, we play stuff like Deputy of Love. I mean,
right,
obviously disco record, right? But they would call that house.
right.
So, but yeah, I think that was part of it as well. Absolutely.
Well, and it would make sense. I mean, just
Mhm.
like what I said, what was happening simultaneously with the warehouse, and at the same time, you guys were doing, your culture of crowd,
Yeah.
and since you guys were playing the same music, they
Right.
they wanted to call it different music, even
Sure.
though it was the same. So
Absolutely.
it would probably make sense why they call it house music then. That's
Yeah.
why, and probably more so they made sure they call it house music more than more than disco.
Exactly. And it's funny that you said this now because after all these years, that's so right on point. I never thought of it like that, but I think that's 100% correct. The way
Okay.
you explain that, yeah, because they did not want to. The stray kids did not want to assimilate with the gay kids, especially back then, because people were
Well,
very
I mean,
homophobic then. Not like they are today, but
well,
back then,
it was the times.
Sure,
It was the times. It wasn't, it wasn't something that it would. Yeah, I mean, it was the way their parents were with them and so forth. So
right,
it's like when I remember when I was DJing over a Circuit nightclub,
hmm,
and the Latino community couldn't you couldn't, I mean, especially with Latin community, God forbid that you bring us something with a half naked man to the house. And so we had to create flyers with, you know, with artists, like, you know, Paulina Rubio and with, you know, Shakira and, you know, and those would be, and I would be like, well, they can take this home with them, because if they get caught with it, they didn't want to, you know, have their parents bust them. You know?
Sure.
So I'm sure that's how it was with your crowd, and I specifically your crowd, because they say, "Oh, we're going to go listen to house music." If they said the word disco, they probably turned around and said,
"Exactly, absolutely, yeah."
So, so the world now knows,
right?
The world now knows. But
and so that's I'm glad you said this, because that kind of explains a whole lot, and it also explains how the term house music has two different meanings, because it has the meaning of disco for these straight kids who that's how they knew that disco music, and then also because of, you know, and the house took momentum once the straight kids started going to the warehouse, because hello, it's warehouse. So that helped the momentum. And then when these same kids, these same DJs started making records, where did they make their records? In their house. So that even took on, that really cemented the genre of house music and the term house music.
Right. Yeah. And hence, why do you think I wanted to interview you? So this is part of the way what we want people to know, that this history and stuff like that. I think it's very important that people know. And then this argument back and forth about who created house and stuff. No, you know what? It was nobody created house. It was the things that happened that made the house. Now, but there was a culture that was happening as well. And how did you guys, because when like interviewing Steve Silcurti, a lot of these DJs started doing their own music as well, and their own kind of, is that what you guys were doing as well? You were doing your own, I guess the technology was starting to get a little bit with the reel to reels and the 4-tracks and, you know, all the other stuff that was happening as far as.
I think that, you know, well, first of all, Steve Silcurti, right? I used to sneak him out the house, right? I literally used to pull up, me and my partner, Bertha, used to pull up in that, you know, outside, and he would climb out his back window, because his parents were real strict, and come to the party with us. I mean, that's how well and long I've known Steve Silcurti. Great guy, by the way. But so people like Steve came later, but people would see Jesse and me when we started making records, you know, and then these records started doing really well, selling. Like Jesse had On and On, which became a huge hit record, and then I went on the A-list, Dr. Derelict, and I had this record called Undercover, which was a big record. Farley did the remix and used to kill it on BMX, you know, and these records start. So, you know, other DJs were like, well, shit, if Wayne and Jesse can do this, we can do this, and so. Then Farley started making records. Then Steve started making records, you know, and everybody else, you know.
Well, at that time,
Jamie Principle, yeah.
Right at the time, and then talking about Jamie Principle, he already had his first record before Jesse. Am I mistaken? He had made his.
No, well. Let me say this, right. Usually, for factual reasons, in other words, recorded music, the answer to that is no. You know, Jesse pressed his record up before Jamie pressed his record up. Jamie pressed his record up either late 85 or 86, where Jesse pressed his record up January of 84. Now, Jamie had a cassette tape.
Right. That's what I meant.
Yeah, he had a cassette tape that was played, and but then Jesse also had before it was pressed, Jesse also had his drum machine that he would take to the clubs with the track on it, with the On and On track on it, and play it at the parties. You know, that's how we knew it was going to sell, because, you know, and so that was early too. So you can't really go by when people have an idea or when they when a cassette or a 4-track, anything like that is made in your bedroom or whatever, you have to go by when it's recorded and pressed as far as history is concerned, you know.
Right.
And so Jesse took it to the pressing plant, Precision Records, and got it pressed in January '84. Now, what took Jamie so long to press the tape he had, I have no idea. But yes, there were. In fact, I even think Steve had an earlier version as well. So who to say who had the earlier version, be it Jamie, Jesse, or Steve? Because they all had early. Like Steve used to play this tape, "I Can't Turn Around," real early on before he
with his 4-track.
with his 4-track before he even played that. So that's why you can't go by that. You don't know what's in somebody's basement or when they come up with the idea. You got to go by when it's pressed. So
right.
Yeah.
So so there we have. Okay, so what makes you guys decide? Is it just because of the fact that you're bringing the drum machine to the club and they're playing it, and you said, you know what, we got to put this on record? Is that where you guys said?
Well, for me, I had a that record, the On and On, that Jesse copied was from this Mach 3 record that I would play. That I had an import of it. And when a lot of imports, you couldn't get more copies or whatever. They would run out. And so he wouldn't want to use my record by Mach 3 because when I played it was a big record for the kids at the time. And, but I wouldn't let him use it because I have a party, right? He got a party, I got a party. You can't use the hot record, right? So he got mad, like, well, man, look, I'm going to make it. I was like, okay. He said, leave the record at my house and I'm going to make it. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. But if you do that, you got to make a record for me. And that was kind of the deal we made. And he said, okay. And so I honestly didn't think he was going to even make a damn record. I thought he was just talking. But I should have known better because Jesse's very competitive like me. And I wouldn't let him use the record. So he got mad. So he just made the record. And that's how On and On came to be. Right. He just made his version of it and it became, but that's what we would do. We would take tracks and things that we make and we would take them to the club first and we would test them out on the crowd and see how they would react. And if they reacted, if they went crazy on it, I never forget the first time Jesse took it to the playground and On and On, the drum machine. This isn't the record. He took the drum machine and he played the drum machine version On and On. And it's the first time, because disco is kind of soft drums, right? But when that drum machine kicked in, boom, boom, them kids went bananas, man. They was like, oh, what? It was just going crazy. And that's when we knew. That's when the genre house music started, because you could tell something special had just happened, just by the reaction. Because, as DJs, we see different reactions in records and stuff. But that kind of reaction, sound-wise, from made such a huge difference. And next thing you know, everybody's making drum machine reference.
Right. And that's where I think that's, I got to give credit to Jesse because I guess for DJs, all of a sudden it could be done.
Exactly. Absolutely.
That was it. Then the floodgates open up.
Absolutely.
He
can do it. I can do it.
Yeah. It is. Right. It's just like, and I want to kind of back up because I want to make sure that everybody understands it. There was one of the disco DJs, if you remember, was Kenny Jammin' Jason.
Oh yeah, definitely.
DJ, and he was already on the radio. WDAI. There was Mike Machiarello. That was one of the DJs and stuff like that.
Lou DeVito, Peter Lewicki.
Yeah, Peter Lewicki. So these guys were, and I think Kenny was the only one that didn't really do gay clubs, but I know the other guys were very well known in the gay scene.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know, and the only reason why is because Kenny Jason lived in the Little Village neighborhood. So he was dealing with a lot of the, doing the high school dances like you were in Little Village, Blessed Agnes and, and all those, they kind of have, so where did Farty come into this as far as where, you are doing this between 80 and 85? Where does Farty fall into this?
Farley used to come to the party. Like he used to ask to carry our records, right? so he could get in the party for free, right? Because we were the hot DJs at the party, right? So of course he wanted to come to the party, you know. And so I never let him, right? But Jesse did, right? And so there was this promoter named Al McCormick who hired Farley, because Farley used to, you know, play stepping records, you know. He was a stepping DJ, you know. And Al would get him to want to do all these stepping parties. But Farley had, once he got the bug from coming to our party, he's like, man, I don't want to do that stepping. I want to play with Jesse playing. But Al didn't know him like that, so Al would never give him the chance. So what Al would do, he would hire Jesse, and then along with Farley, and so that way Farley could learn under Jesse, you know,
right?
You know how to do, you know, and the kind of music we were playing and stuff like that. And that's kind of how Farley came into the fold. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so where do you, so you're making music, you guys are making music, you guys are DJing, and 86, 87, this is a big thing now. Everybody's coming out with a record, right? Everybody's coming in with DJs. The Hot Mix 5 is created, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
As far as that now. The Hot Mix 5 is created. Do you think that was because
they were created before then, but I don't know exactly. Maybe if you talk to Farley or one of those guys, Mickey or Ralphie, they can tell you. But I think they were created before then, the Hot Mix 5.
Right. Oh, well, what I mean is that the Hot Mix 5, did they have any influence? Do you think the Hot Mix 5 was created after the Chosen 6?
Chosen Few?
Your Chosen Few DJs? Was it just kind
of?
Oh,
yeah. We were before the...
Right.
We was way before the Hot Mix 5, but in fact, we were on radio before the Hot Mix 5. We were on her. Me and Jesse were on Herb Kent's Punk House show on WXFM.
Okay, and that was what year was that?
I was like, I want to say like 80.
Okay.
And back then, not only were we playing disco, but we would play. I would go to this club called The Exit in Chicago, and I would get all these like Rock Lobster, and Planet Claire, and Adam Ant, you know, Kraftwerk. I find out all this alternative music as well, and we would play that at our parties too. And so Herb Kent came to one of our parties, and he was like, "Man, Wayne, tell me about this music. I want to do a show on this music." I'm like, "Cool." And so me and Jesse, Dave Harrison, and Mike Marcharello would give Herb all this music, and we were the DJs mixing on his Punk House show on Saturday night on WXFM, and this was before they had a BMX. You know?
Right, Herb, they don't. A lot of people don't understand. Herb can open a lot of doors for a lot of people. Oh my God!
Absolutely. I mean, unbelievable.
And not just. I'm not just talking about I'm talking about all genres. This guy had, you know, one of my DJs, Pablo Punkout Gonzalez, was, you know, one of the guest DJs on there. You know, yeah. It's just amazing that, and I, you know, I used to see Herb all the time when I was working at Sigiro Menswear. So I used to see him when he used to come in shopping, you know, back in the days. But he was, you know, and a lot of people didn't know who he was. I knew who he was.
Sure.
But it was just, and just to hear his interviews and to find out all the, you know, doorways he opened up for a lot of people.
Herb was amazing, Prieto. Let me tell you, his daughter would come to our parties. I'm sure she's the one who told her dad about the music we were playing, how these black kids listening to B-52s and Adam Ant. I know that probably freaked him out, which is probably what made him come. But what freaked me out was this old guy loving and understanding this music. I'm like, Herb Kent was unbelievable, man. I mean, he would he would just be so accepting of all kind of styles. And he used to tell me all the time, there's only two types of records, good records and bad records. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. So, and he didn't matter what, if it was a rock record, a heavy metal record, it was either a good heavy metal record or bad heavy record. Right. It was either a good disco record or a bad disco record. He was good. That's how he looked at music.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you go from this point to? Do you create your own record company? Is that word, or is that what's happened with you, or how do you, where does this go?
Well, I started working at Trax Records.
Okay.
So once Jesse made pressed his record up, and then I did my record. My record was second. My record came out in March of '84. undercover. And we would get it pressed at this pressing plant. And the guy who owned it was Larry Sherman. And he would mostly press up polka records and K-Tel records, right? But once he saw us selling all these records that we were selling, these house records, he was like, well, I want to get in on this business, you know? And so, but I ended up just hanging out there, and then I ended up working for him, doing A&R for him, picking a lot of the records like the Move Your Bodies, the No Way Backs, Mr. Lee, I Can't Believe This, you know, all this stuff, man, all the stuff that would, Mr. Fingers, Can You Feel It, Future, DJ Pierre, I mean, so much different stuff. Maurice Joshua, you know, would come in and he would always ask me what I thought, you know, so I started working at Trax Records.
Okay, and how long did you do that for, working for Trax Records? How long did you?
From about 80, I want to say 85 to about 89.
Okay.
But I would come in and out because he was a shystery sort of guy, so he would bounce checks and stuff like that, you know. So
really?
So I would quit, then I would come back, then I would quit again, then I would come, you know what I'm saying? So I was always kind of like in and out.
So the checks would bounce, but then you get the money from him, and then he said, okay, like, I want you working with me again.
Exactly. Like one time I quit for 2 months, and he's like, why haven't you got? I said, because that check you gave me bounced. That's why I have it. And he was like, oh, come on, I got the money for you. I got the money for you.
Yeah,
he would always, but then that's how I realized because, you know, think about it, Larry, he didn't know a good house record from a bad house record. So
right.
I didn't realize how dependent he was on me until he called me at my house, kept asking me to come back and say, man, tell me what you think of this record, or this record, you know, this tape or that tape or this. And so anyway, that's how I realized I was valuable, you know,
Right.
working there, you know.
It's so after it was 4 years working with him. Where do you go? Where does Rick take you?
I started to manage an artist named Adonis, and Jive Records, who was based overseas at the time, was very interested in Adonis. And that was during my times that I quit working for Larry, right? And so but I already had their contact, so they called me and they knew I knew everybody and where they lived and stuff like that. And so they asked me, they want to get into the house music thing, and Adonis was like their main act they wanted. And so I was going back and forth, and they would ask me. And so while I was doing that, I was going back, they would ask me about other artists in Chicago. And so I told them about Mr. Lee, told them about DJ Pierre, I told them about Liz Torres and Jesse. I told them about, I must have told them about 9 or 10 other acts, you know, out of Chicago. And and I would get them their music. And so they centered on Adonis, Mr. Lee, Liz Torres, and DJ Pierre. And so it took a while to get the Adonis deal done. And once that deal was done, I thought I was pretty much done with that, you know, the Jive Records, but because they had signed him. But they called me back and asked me if I wanted to work for them. And the reason they did that because they wanted to get to these other artists, the Liz Torres and the DJ Pierre and the Mr. Lee. And so they asked me to come work for them. And so that's when I started working for Jive Records in 1989.
What was your title as far as was that A&R or was that?
Well, you know, Jive was an independent label, and I'm gonna tell you a story, Prieto. It's crazy, right? But when they asked me to work for them, at that time I told you I had quit working for Trax. I didn't have no job, and you know, I literally it was a crazy time in my life because I grew up Catholic and I had stopped. I got away from Catholicism and I started searching other religions and things like that, right? And so someone said, "You ever read the Bible for yourself?" And I felt like an idiot, right? Because I was like, no, you know. They said, "You might want to read it for yourself, and instead of taking another man's word for what it says, right?" And so I was like, okay. So I did that, and then I settled on the Bible and just being a Christian, right? And because I read it and it made complete sense to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm rolling with this, right? And at that time, I literally asked, because in the Bible it says you can ask God for anything. So I said, God, I'm busted, disgusted, and can't be trusted, but I need a job, right? It says I can ask, it says it here. So I'm asking, but I'm rolling with this book no matter what happened, but I'm going to ask. It says I can ask, so I'm asking. And literally 2 weeks after that, Jive Records called and asked me to do A&R for them. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know what A&R was. I had no idea what it was. And so I said, oh, but I wasn't gonna let them know that, right? So I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that's cool, And I literally hopped the train. I was living on 71st and King Drive. I literally hopped the train. I walked to the train, hopped it, because I had no money, and took it to downtown to Crocs and Britanos. And I looked in the book, this business of music, what A&R was. And it said A&R, artist and repertoire, and it lasts, usual A&R holds a job for 3 to 5 years. I was like, 3 to 5 years? Wow, that's short. But okay. But that's how I learned what A&R was. And I'm like, man, I've been doing that, because I didn't realize it though.
Right, right.
And so I was like, okay. And but that's how I found out what A&R was. And yeah, they asked me to do A&R. And so then at the same time, while I was on the phone with them, they asked me, is there anything else, anything else you want or need? I was like, you don't ask no black man that, first of all, right? So I was like,
hey, especially if somebody with no job.
Exactly. A broke black man who just had his car repossessed? Absolutely not, right? So I was like, I'm gonna need an office. And like, oh yeah, we plan on getting you an office. I didn't even know that, right? I was like, oh, okay. And I said, anything else? I was like, I'm gonna need a studio. And they were like, a studio? I said, yeah, these kids, they work out their home and out of their house, and they need a proper studio to help. They're like, we'll think about that. And eventually they got me a studio and an office, right?
Right.
But that's God's work, bro.
Yeah.
That's not my work. Because once I committed to Jesus Christ as my Savior, when I tell you, everything just started to just roll and roll. It was the most amazing thing. If I told you anything else, I'd be lying to you, brother.
Right.
I swear to God, I would. And we go back. I would never lie to you.
I know. I
Right.
know. I know. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize we've known each other for a very long time. So
exactly.
Not as long as you've known some of the other guys, but I mean, we've known each other for quite a long time. So you're working with Jive. You're signing these guys, and you're now, and that's how I think I met you, working through Jive. That's how I got to meet you. And it was because I was with record pools as well. And then obviously in those record pools, they introduce you to A&R guys all the time. And I think that was just in that era that I know you had signed. I think White Knight was one of the guys
White
I knew
Knight.
as well. Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
I think it was also Fast Eddie was I think I'm not sure as well. I wasn't sure if Fast Eddie was part of the.
Yeah, not Fast Eddie.
Oh God, I'm trying to think. But I know there was
Mr. Lee.
Mr. Lee, yes, Mr. Lee. But I remember what was happening now is that the Chicago house scene or house DJs producers, they were starting to see like they didn't have to go to Trax or DJ International Records. They were going into and Jive was considered like let's put it like there was local and then there was above local, which was Prelude and and we can go on to Sony and here comes different labels. So once you got on those labels, you're like, oh wow, as they said,
right.
we can do that.
they checks didn't bounce, okay.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that again, open up the can of worms where to say, oh, we can do that.
Right, exactly.
We have better representation, or we're getting a worldwide distribution, or all the other things that happen. So how long did you work for Jive Records?
28 years.
Oh, a long time.
Long time.
So you weren't just handling now, just not house. You were handling everybody that was coming into Jive. Is that correct? You were just handling
everything. I mean, I started because you asked me what my title. they didn't give me a title, which was, quite frankly, they just said I work for them, so I gave myself a title. You know, so I said branch manager and director of A&R. I wish I could find my first card, because I remembered I had some cards on the table, and the boss came by when I was in New York and said, "Oh, so you're branch manager and the A&R director?" I was like, "Yeah, someone had to be it." But they didn't name me that, right? It was so funny. But later on, though, you know, through the work that I did, you know, I started. They named me, you know, senior director, then senior VP of A&R, and you know, different A&R director, senior A&R director, and then senior VP of A&R. So throughout my years, I would constantly get different titles.
Just kept growing up the step ladder of
Exactly.
they created new names for everything of
Exactly.
a step.
Sometimes they give me titles and won't give me no extra money. I'm like, look, forget the title. I want more money. Yeah.
Hey, I was just gonna say, you
Yeah.
know, if there's a change of title, it's gonna be a change of pay. You know?
Right. Yeah. Not all the time.
You're like, wait a minute, that was 2 titles ago. What do you mean? Where's the money?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you did that for a long time, and you've signed quite a few memorable. I mean, let's be honest with you, Jive Records is a very, very reputable, let's say, record label, and you signed some guys. I know R. Kelly was on there as well. You know,
Yeah.
Robert Hood, I've known for years as well, since my breakdancing days. You know, that's where
Oh, wow.
you know, that's what, you know, that was back in the days, you know,
Mm-hmm.
79, I was breakdancing and Robert was singing in the train station.
Oh, wow.
That's how long I've known Robert.
Okay.
And then,
you knew him before me.
Yes, I knew him for that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Way before. Well, because he didn't make his debut as far as a musician until I think 82, 83-ish. I want to say that he was.
I
mean,
signed him in 90.
Right. But I mean, he was always singing,
91.
but you know, I mean, just like anybody else, someone had to
Sure.
give him a break, and then he probably went into a independent label, and then obviously
Exactly.
you got him when he was already kind of established, or you know, like he was making a mark, or you know, in Chicago. So all these guys, you know, and then I think while this is going on, when did you start your picnic aspect of it?
I started that in 1990.
Okay, so that was you're still working for Jive.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the idea behind that? I mean, what was your?
Well, we had at that point in time, some of the DJs have moved out of state, and so Jesse moved to L.A. Tony Hatchett moved to Houston, and we had kind of stopped DJing together as a group. We were just DJing individually.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesse was, one year he was coming back to 89, he was coming back to Chicago, and he said he wanted to do a party. And so he wanted all of us to DJ, you know. Well, he hired me and another DJ, one of the guys. And so that party was real successful. And mind you, it was in the wintertime. The party had to be about 20 below, you know, because it was around Christmas. And but we didn't think that many people would come out because it was so cold. But it ended up that party was packed. We're like, man, people still want to hear us play together, right? And so at that party, we said, we should do this once a year. You know, we should come back once a year and do a party so people can hear us play together. And well, Jesse was like, well, I don't want to come back when it's 20 below, because he had got used to the LA weather, right? And Tony felt the same way, right? So we said, well, when's the next time we always come back together? Look, you guys come home. And they said the other holiday is around the 4th of July. And so Tony's family did a reunion picnic behind the museum every 4th of July. So we said, well, we'll all just DJ there then.
Okay.
And and we'll just tell people that's where we'll be, and people can see us DJ together once a year at behind the museum, and that's how it started.
Okay, so it's just started as a reunion picnic for you
Yeah,
guys.
old
So
school, and because we all play new music, all year, but people would always want us to reminisce and hear the classics, and they said, and so we said,
the
okay,
classic disco slash house
classic
music.
disco, exactly. And so we said, okay, well, we'll come back together once a year, and that's what we'll do. We'll play the classics, the old school, and play old school house music.
Right, and that
In
was, you said 1990, right? That was your,
1990.
that
Hmm.
would be your first. So this would have been 30 years this year, right? Am I correct? That would have
Yes,
been 30 years.
this would have been our 30th anniversary.
And fucking COVID fucked that up. So,
Yes, delete 2020, right? So yeah, we don't even count this year. So next year is going to be our 30th.
wow, that's good.
Right.
So I'm going to fast forward because I know I'm going past your hour and I don't want to keep you. But me and you had kind of conversation one year. I believe we were at the Billboard conference. Am I correct? If so, I tell the story. So that's why I asked you if you've seen his interviews. Um, in 1990, 2005, I think you were still working at Jive, and I had just brought Pitbull to Chicago, and that was when I first was doing reggaeton music.
Absolutely.
And I remember you being at the Billboard conference. You literally didn't know anybody there. You knew me, but you didn't really know a lot of people. You were getting
Sure.
introduced by a lot of people, but you came up to me and you said, "Hey, I don't know this music, but I want to know this music. Introduce me to somebody."
Yeah.
And the two people I introduced you were Wisin and Yandel. That's what
Yeah.
that was the two people. And
Right.
and that was how this collaboration happened between the Robert Kelly and Wisin and Yandel record for "Burn It Up," right? That's how.
Absolutely.
That's how
Absolutely.
it all.
Absolutely. Because I didn't know anybody in that art form, but I knew you did. I knew you did.
Yeah.
And so when I saw you, I'm like, yes, I got somebody who I know, who I can also trust. And you're not just gonna tell me anything. You're gonna tell me who the real people are, in the reggaeton field at that time. And so, what a great collaboration that was, by the way. Robert was very open to doing it, which was outstanding as well. And those guys were as well. And what a great collabo. I mean,
Well, first of all, they're great people. I mean, my God, they're just like they're humble people.
Yeah.
Yandel, the skinnier guy was always he spoke more Spanish, but Wisin was actually the one who I was more able to communicate with but once they knew the music and they knew whoever it was that easy. It was happened. And then I think I forgot who invited me to the when you guys were doing the filming at Soundbar.
The video.
And I was like, no, man, it's okay. I don't, I didn't want to be, look.
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, nah, I don't, that wasn't why I did the connection. It was for you guys to do something together, because I've always, when I even talked to you, I remember saying, there needs to be this music is phenomenal. There's got, I think with you and what this is happening, I think that would be a perfect bridge for it to become worldwide known. And I think that was kind of one of the first records that had the collaboration between an English artist and a reggaeton artist, if I'm not mistaken. And it was huge.
Huge. It was huge. And I can't tell you how many times Rob put that record on in the studio, and we would just go crazy to that song, man. I mean, we would dance, we would go nuts. It was when you have those cultures of music that mix, and it's just like such like harmony and the fact that the love came from both sides too,
Right.
I think that it's so important, especially today. Yeah, so much division in the world today, when we've never had that in our hearts. You've always been a very genuine person. I know I'm a genuine person. We don't do that racist shit, you know. And I think that I really just wish the world could be more like us, honestly, Prieto, you know, where we just accept people for who they are, you know.
Well, I mean, like you said, there's good records and bad records. There's no, there's no, you know what I'm saying. It's and there's good people and bad people. There's no, you know, there's no gray in between, and that's just that's the way it is. I think for what you do, what I do, I think we especially in Chicago, and I'm going to say it's more so in Chicago because we're dealing with Chicago. We are in Chicago, but I think that with everything else, fast forward to what's happening now and the current situation that we're in, and with the COVID and stuff like that, I really believe that what we do in this music industry is a healing process for a lot of people. You know, that's, you know, I think
absolutely
what you just did with your, you know, with your driving, your pop-up driving thing that you just did this past Friday, what I'm doing this Sunday is part of that process with getting people to enjoy music. And I think that when I talk about the different riots that happen here in Chicago, whether if it's the Black riots, the Puerto Rican riots, everything else that has happened, if you ever look at anything that had a riot, there was a upsurge of music that happened afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, you know, and I look at back, like for instance, I talk about the Puerto Rican riots that happened in '77. All of a sudden, here comes the bands and the Puerto Rican bands, and also, and salsa music becomes this part of this culture. And I think right now, with this year, cross it out, it's done. But come 2021, 2022, I think we're going to see this surge of music and how it's going to help this country get together, and or you know, this, I think it's important, especially Chicago. I mean, I should say more Chicago. Anything else you want to say on your end?
Well, I just want to say we all have to learn to live together and respect each other. Right. And no matter what color or race or nationality or any of that, you know, we're all human beings. We all bleed red, you know. And I think that we have to learn to love each other as human beings. And you know, I think that we're just living in a time now where there's a lot of nonsense going on, and I think that we have to block out that noise of the nonsense of the separation, because it takes us all. It takes, as they say, it takes a village, and we're all part of that village, you know. And me being a Christian, that's the only way I could think, because I know God made everybody. And so and God wants us to love everybody, not separate races and people and crap like that. He wants us to love everybody. And so we have to hopefully, you know, things will get better. And as you say, music is the one key that everybody gets along with. And hopefully, especially the type of music we do, it can really bring us together as a human race, you know.
That's why I said about Steve, like, music is the key.
Music is the key. Exactly.
Yeah, and, you know, and we were talking about it when he throws his rap down. Music is the key to such and such, you know.
Right.
And it just, ironic that that verse means to everybody. It's a fact. It's like, if you want to look at it as the way that this should be, this world should look at music. And I'm not just talking house, man. I'm just talking about that. We have something different because we're, you know, you're a little older than me, a little older than me, but at the same time, but we have a culture of people that have followed us for all this time. So obviously, you know, that would, I think that's what helps our, you know, doing what you do, doing what I do. We have that following because they come from a different school than the new school that is now. You know, they have different values. They have different way of way they handle problems. I think that what's happening now is like the new school people, they don't look at it the same way like we look at it. We've been there, you know, we're much wiser about things, and obviously, you know, and it's unfortunate that, you know, they're going to, you know, we look at them and going,
Right.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
what can you do?
Right.
You can't do anything. All we can do is like, well, you go ahead and do your nonsense, and we're gonna
Right.
do what we're gonna do, and be, you know, and like you're one of the things that I know that happens with you. Here what was the latest numbers for the chosen few? How many people?
Oh, we had over 100,000 watch that day, but we had over 3 million viewing on YouTube.
But I'm just talking
After-
as far as the park. How
Oh,
many
for the
people?
park, that's
Yeah.
usually between 25 and 40,000.
Okay, I mean, I'm doing the numbers, and that and how many fights are happening at your event? 20,000,
Zero.
25,000.
Zero.
Exactly.
It's all about love.
Right. And here
Yeah.
I do my Alhambra event, you know, I do 500, 600 people.
Yeah. How many fights?
Zero. You
Zero.
know, zero. And
Right.
we have literally one security at the door.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. I mean, I tell people, do you know how much savings you don't have to, I mean, honestly, you know, in a normal setting, you
Mhm.
have to put security for every 15, 25 people. Oh
Yeah.
my God, you know, you would have 1,000 security for, you know, what you do. And you're not
Yeah.
gonna you don't have 1,000 security,
No.
obviously. No, I mean,
No.
but also the crowd that we're dealing with are grown folks. That's, you know,
Exactly.
and that's the kind of, I think that's where.
And we preach. We make a concerted effort to preach love and unity too. You know,
Right.
acceptance, accept everybody, black, white, straight, gay, tall, short. It doesn't matter. You know, all nationalities. And so we make a concerted effort to preach that love and unity. And I think that, you know, obviously it pays off. You know, because even the music that we play it's about love, it's about spirituality, it's about unity, it's about, you know, those sort of things, and that makes a big difference. I truly believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's you know, um, I think for you know, as far as the history of Chicago, you and there's a few guys that should be commended as far as, you know, what we do in Chicago and stuff like that. This is what, and I look forward for the day when that happens, because I know you're going to be up there as one of the guys that are going to be, you know, a lifetime achievement award and so forth, because I think you deserve that as well.
Well,
There's a couple guys that, you know, in a sense of, this is Chicago history.
well, Prieto, you as well. I mean, people don't. I mean, your resume is amazing, and people. I don't know how many people realize what you've done, even behind the scenes, and things that you've done and put together musically, when it comes to not just the city but worldwide. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that the same goes for you as well, my friend.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, that's the end of our show. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're very honored that you did this show, and, you know, and guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys and replay it. If there's any links or anything you want to post on the interview, please put it on the bottom, Wayne. Please. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.